Welcome to Prosperity Podcast, where we explore the ways in which God blesses his people through spiritual, emotional, and physical prosperity. Our goal is to interview guests in the marketplace and in the ministry and hear their stories, how God has directed their lives. We hope that you learn something from these interviews to apply to your life. And in these next series of podcasts, it's going to be about yielding ourselves to God's voice and his call in our life. And we're going to explore how our passions, how our talents and our skills, how our current assignment all plays into our purpose and our calling in our life. Ephesians 2:10 says, "For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them." I read the Passion Translation the other day, and I really thought it was powerful, and I'm going to read it as well. It says, "We have become his poetry, a recreated people that will fulfill the destiny he has given each of us. For we are joined to Jesus, the Anointed One. Even before we were born, God planned in advance our destiny and the good works we would do to fulfill it." God has set a destiny upon all of us. He has given us a purpose and a plan, and it's up to us to actually be obedient and to yield ourselves to what he is calling us to do. In that yielding, in that submission, we actually find the true purpose for our lives and begin to do the good works, not out of striving, but actually out of the opposite of rest, and actually resting in the yieldedness of to God, and we fulfill what we're called to do. So today we have a special guest, evangelist Rob McCorkle. He has been doing ministry for over 42 years in this nation and in over 8 other different countries. Back in 2007, he saw a revival break out in his home congregation, and in 2009 started a Fire School Ministry school that was built to steward what God was doing in his home church. And now, full-time, he is leading Fire School Ministries, and has authored multiple books, and you can find all his work at fireschoolministries.com. So I want to welcome to this podcast, Rob McCorkle. How are you?
Greetings. Great to be with you.
So, Rob, walk me through how you processed making the decision to move into full-time ministry. When did you know that was what God was calling you to do?
At age 12, but I didn't want to. I was very scared. I was very nervous. I am by nature someone who is shy, uh, someone who really does not desire the platform. And I was looking in through a window at a large auditorium. It was locked up. I was looking through the window. I didn't hear the audible voice, but I knew the presence of God was speaking to me and said, "One day you're going to be on that platform." And I knew it was a calling to give my life to full-time ministry. That was at age 12.
So were you a Christian at age 12? Is that or is this before you kind of made
I was raised in a Christian home, so I had Christian concepts at least. I understood a few basics, enough to know that the Lord was speaking to me. I'd been in those kinds of services, raised in that kind of an atmosphere. And so I was certain the Lord was speaking to me at age 12, but I just totally rejected the whole concept and the idea. And fast forward, my life just went from bad to worse until I rededicated my life, really got born again for real, at age 19. And then it all came back again. The Lord says, "Well, that's great. Now that I got you, are we going to do ministry, or are we just going to play around?"
so age 12, you heard the call, kind of deep within your spirit, and then just wanted to do your own thing. Age 19, rededicated your life, and all those feelings of that call kind of came back. That vision, that prophetic insight, whatever you call it.
Yeah. It was my freshman year at college, and I think I was maybe 20 then, maybe 21. And I knew, it was 19, I guess, really. But I knew the Lord, I rededicated my life, or actually really got born again and yielded myself to Jesus completely. And it was like within 6 months, he was already just saying, hey, what are you going to do with your life? Because I haven't changed my mind. And that was in the summer of 82. And so I remember I was at a very large service as a camp meeting in northwestern Ohio. It was about 1,200 people in this camp meeting, maybe 1,500. The Lord called me out in August of 82, 1982, and just said, "Are you in or are you out?" And I went forward, and at that time they had a big altar at this camp meeting, and I literally laid myself, I draped myself over the altar, and I said, "My life is a blank sheet of paper. You can fill it in with
Wow.
anything."
Wow.
And I remember that prayer very vividly, and he said, "Okay." So I started preaching within less than 6 months, February of '83. I guess that would be 6 months. Started preaching. I was going to college, and I just meetings just opened up. I can't explain it. Guys that knew me said, "Hey, why don't you come and preach, share your story, blah blah blah." One thing turned into another, and so I preached all the way through college, and then I got my master's, preached all through my master's. I got my Master of Divinity and preached, and actually kept doing that up until 1990 when I took my first church. Was there for 7 years, so I didn't travel anymore. And then after 7 years, my wife and I started a church in Columbus, Ohio, in 1997, and that's a church we were in for 21 years that really experienced an outpouring of revival. And then I started traveling while I was pastoring. My wife also became an ordained elder, and she pastored, so we co-pastored. I started traveling in 2009, and then fast forward to 2019, we both went itinerant.
So I want to rewind just a little bit. Your yes in college to yes, I'll start preaching. You didn't have to go out and seek preaching opportunities. They just opened up, and people begin to ask you, "Hey, I know this guy Rob. He's a rock star. Bring him in."
Um, Largely, yes. There was a few guys I'd call and say, um, I'm going to be in your area, and my roommate, I played the piano. My roommate would sing. So we're going to be in the area if you're interested. But to be real honest with you, and I know this sounds super spiritual, but when I said yes in 1983, opportunities just began to open. I mean, I was on vacation and visiting a church, and a pastor said, "Would you like to preach tonight?" I mean, it was like I'm a visitor. And he found out I was in school, asked me what I was doing in school. I told him, and he said, "Why don't you come back and preach for us tonight?" And so it was just opportunities. I just got asked to preach. I did weekend meetings. And so even to this day, I rarely will ever ask for a meeting.
Would you say that is a indication of someone walking in their divine purpose when they say yes? God will confirm it by opening doors.
Yeah, I really would. And that doesn't mean I just, sit back and relax and don't do anything. There's, I have a YouTube channel. I've done blog. I've done newsletters. My ministry has a page. I've published books, and all of that certainly helps, but all of that is done under the inspiration and direct leadership of the Lord. It was never my idea to write. I really felt like my calling. Gary Keller has a self-help book called The One Thing. I read it in 2019, and the gist of the book is everyone's on the planet to do one thing. You got to figure out what that one thing is, and then all of life is focused toward that. When you're younger, there's an assortment of things you can do. I mean, I was a youth pastor, I was a staff pastor. I did it all. I did music. I did children's classes. You do it all. But over time, Keller says you got to really be focused on, what's the one thing done with both purpose and excellence. The calling we would use in Christendom. What would be our calling? And with that comes passion and so forth and so on. And then you block time to do that one thing. And it helped put language to what I knew, but I'm on the planet for one reason. It's to teach.
Okay.
That's it.
So you would say that your passion and calling is to teach.
I'm a teacher. And that manifests in two ways. Preaching, conferences, revivals, so forth, so on, traveling, and writing. And so for me, there's a divine compelling to do this. There's a divine propensity. I don't, it's like almost I don't have a choice. The thumb of the presence of God is pushing me, compelling me forward. And with that then comes opportunities and doors are open that no man can shut, as it were. I can refuse to go through them, but doors are opening up.
Have you ever refused to go through things and that you knew that, oops, I was being disobedient this time?
Yeah, I've erred on both sides. I've pushed doors open out of my impetuousness, and that has been disastrous. You may get worldly applause, but you don't have kingdom success, and it's empty and very trite, superficial. Matthew 6 talks about that. To get the applause of man, it's flattering and feels good, but it's like drinking froth. There's really nothing to it. And so that's when I've been impetuous and pushed myself into something I thought. Like I distinguish the difference this way. There's a vast difference between assignments and opportunities. Assignments are given by God. Opportunities are a dime a dozen. And whenever we know our calling, when we know our calling, we know what we can say no to. We don't have permission to say no if we don't know what we're called to do. And so knowing what I'm called to do, teach, preach, write, there's things I say no to that take me outside of my lane. Now, to even get narrower, an opportunity calls, a guy calls, says, hey, can you come to our church or can you do this conference? Well, that's an opportunity that I got to ask the Lord if it's an assignment. And if I feel a peace in my spirit, I'm going to go. So I don't go to every church that calls me, says, hey, will you come? Well, let me pray into that. And
so you have a litmus test to measure each opportunity to see if it's an assignment, and if the fruit is, obviously the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness. If there's peace, which is a part of the fruit of the Spirit, you feel like it's a go, it's a green light.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, needs to be in the lane of teaching, writing, or preaching, revival, conference, that type of a thing. And so that that's huge. But when I said yes, it's amazing to me. It doesn't mean it's not without its challenges and conflicts, but the Lord provides, the Lord opens doors. But I did a podcast recently where I said sometimes being obedient puts you in the middle of a storm. You look at the disciples in Mark chapter 6, they said yes to go to the other side, and they were in the middle of a conflict. their storm, their conflict was the result of obedience. So I never want to imply that when we say yes to God and move forward, man, isn't this wonderful? Wow, this is pleasant. No pushback, no challenges, no, sometimes the opposite. But I know I'm called to do it, and the Lord will provide and He will protect. But there's still challenges involved in that yes.
And he gives
Sometimes
you the strength as well in the midst of the storm.
sometimes saying yes to God is no guarantee of what we would say earthly success. Sometimes it's not taking the promotion; it's actually getting paid less.
So
You know.
in the flesh, it seems opposite to what would make sense logically.
Yes, we had you and I have been through conversations on that even within our own ministry. When I stepped out of a ministry full time and moved into another ministry full time, it did not make sense on paper to leave the ministry I was in to go forward into the ministry I chose. And on paper, it wouldn't make sense. And to others who look at it from a humanistic perspective would say, man, are you an idiot? But
That goes back to the title of the book is Fully Yielded Vessel, and and what I'm finding through these interviews is that as we yield our ourselves and become obedient. The last podcast that I just did, the guy used the analogy of a lamp. We can only see the area in front of us for one step. So we take one step, we can see it. We take another step, we can see the next area. So as we fully yield ourselves to the purpose and our calling, and it doesn't have to be ministry. It can be accounting, or it can be teaching teaching in the school. It could be doing spreadsheet work, doing sales. It doesn't have to be necessarily in the ministry, but there is this purpose and this call that he's given us. Has there been any moment or any time where the call has kind of shifted or changed some to where at one season of your life it was definitely this, but it's shifted to something different, or it looks different than before?
sure, significantly in the call to go into itinerant ministry. So we were at our church for 21 years, and that involved, I was a local. I started this church. My wife and I did. We started this church. It blossomed. It was incredible. 9 years into it, the Holy Spirit just dropped in sovereignly on us and blew our church up in a good way. And, from that point on until really we resigned, it was a continuous revival. So I was pastoring, Cindy was pastoring, and I was also going out and doing meetings. So I had this dual role. So I started off as just in the local church, Cindy and I in the local church. The Holy Spirit blew it up, and so I would travel because pastors would call me and say, "Hey, what's going on at your church?" And so I started getting meetings outside of our church, and so I worked it out with the leadership, and they were cool with it. I was often going Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and back on Sunday, and sometimes on Sunday. Sometimes on Sunday night, Monday night, and Tuesday night, I'd be gone.
That's a
But I would
lot
travel. And I did probably. I started off doing 20 meetings, and then 30, and then it turned into 40.
per week, or
Yeah, a year,
wow.
40 meetings a year. Yeah, it was. Um, I don't necessarily brag about that. I'm not certain that I had the correct wisdom to push myself to that degree. This is a whole nother conversation, but there's an addictive nature to fruit bearing that can sometimes push us into activity
Hmm,
that is not led of the Spirit.
that's good.
So, but anyway, I just was. That was a beautiful, beautiful arrangement. I loved pastoring. I loved the church we were in. We started it. We loved the people. We loved the atmosphere. We loved what God was doing in that church. But then I got an opportunity to travel full time, my wife and me together on the road, itinerant. And I loved the local church that we were pastoring, but I had a burden for the church, the big C church across the nation. So I was in a quandary. I loved our church, but I loved the church. Still do. So that was one of those 9-month testing the spirit, as it were. We really struggled and wrestled with, man, what is the right thing to do? Should we go full time? And we chose to go full time. So we resigned after 21 years and joined this international ministry. And Cindy and I traveled together, mostly domestic travel, but we were in 42 states, 43 states, traveled together for 5 years, crisscrossed the nation doing meetings. So I would write and teach, and so that's that twofold: write and teach, right? Or teach, preach and write, preach and write, preach and write, and that was the pinnacle of teaching that I felt called to do. And I did it with Cindy, and of course she taught, and we did it together for 5 years. But that was a very, very, very tough transition.
Oh, I bet. You said 21 years with the same church. Yeah, that's a long time. And I'm sure it was tough for them to let you go as well.
It was tough. I pined for 6 months. I remember just saying, Lord, man, I miss my church. And he said, well, it never was your church.
And was that a good decision?
On most days, yes. Yeah, it was the right decision. It was what I believe the Lord wanted. But I pined the church. There's no doubt about it. I missed the church terribly and its people. Now the interesting thing is we attend there. The senior leader invited us back and said, man, you're like spiritual parents. You need to be here. So we attend there, and it's all good. But yeah, it was the right decision. Again, largely because it fulfilled the mandate of my life.
Right.
Teaching, and it refined it. With pastoring, there's a lot of other things you do that are just part of the package, whether you like it or not. There's meetings, there's counseling, there's a lot of stuff that comes with pastoring, and I don't begrudge that. I did it because I was a responsible pastor. But being an itinerant ministry, you don't have the kinds of responsibilities as you do as pastoring. And so it refined my calling. It allowed me to write and to preach with less stuff hanging on it.
Right.
So it refined it. So
did you find that actually helped you hear better, produce better, write better books or more books, and be able to, because your books, they'll live forever. They're out there. They'll teach the next generation. So you're not just impacting the current local congregation, but your opportunity of impact is much larger now.
Yeah. Well, I believe so. Yeah. I mean, I got 30 years under my belt now as a full-time pastor. And now I have itinerant ministry, and I've been in hundreds of churches across the nation and been outside of the United States in several different countries. And so, my age and my experience have refined me, hopefully has made me better. I would think that my blade has been sharpened and is being sharpened over the years. I have a history with Jesus.
Mm-hmm. I'm finding as I process this question of purpose in life, and actually turning it into a calling, I'm beginning to see that God may call us to one thing for a season, and then but at the same time, He'll give us the vision of something greater. He'll give us the vision or the insight of something next. And do you feel that even in your current season, is there a next we'll call it level. It's like a stair step. You're stair stepping through life. There's this next level, this next another season that you really see God kind of moving you towards.
Yeah, yes, I do. That's really a an insightful question. It's because it uncovers conversations that Cindy and I have had together. What does the next, say, 5 to 10 years look like? And I see I don't know if it'd be a major transition, but I do see a transition nonetheless to where I'm not traveling as much. I'm writing more and I'm doing more teaching online. I'm doing the kinds of meetings that I'm doing would be more equipping and training of pastors and leaders. I see myself speaking in congregations, but man, if you shape a pastor, you shape a church. So I've been praying about what it looks like to really move into more of a equipping pastors role, fathering pastors.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so I don't know. We'll see. And ask me this question in 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, there's a lot of people out there that they feel stuck. They feel like they're in a current assignment that they know, just like you, that they're willing to be obedient, but they haven't seen opportunities open per se. But their current assignment, it feels like a dead end job, but there hasn't been a door that has opened. What kind of advice would you give to someone like that?
Well, when I was 19, the hunger I have now, I have the same hunger and passion,
Hmm.
not just for Christ, but for my calling. I still have a hunger and a desire to sharpen myself to be the best instrument in the hands. Romans 6:13, I'm offering myself to him as an instrument of righteousness. That word instrument can be translated weapon. I want to be a weapon discharged and used in the hands of God. I want to be sharp, ready. I want to be healthy. I want to be physically fit. I want my mind to be active. And so I read, I study, I'm an avid student to this day. I'm hungry. But if you back up to like age 19 or 20, I was willing to do anything. And I think that to be 19 and expect, man, why aren't how come I'm not getting opportunities to do conferences? Why, how come I can't preach in that conference? And I'm like, stop all that stuff. I don't if you're not willing to sweep the floors of a church, should you be ready to preach on the platform? You see what I'm saying? There's a natural progression of humility and development of character. And so at age 19, I told you a little while ago that opportunities opened up, but opportunities opened up like to be a youth pastor for a summer at a church that was running 40 people. Maybe I had 8 or 9 kids, and I got paid nothing. But I did it. Why? Because I wanted the experience. And so I did it. I was at another church where they were without a youth pastor. It was a large church, maybe 400, and they had a youth group of about 25, 30. And so they went almost a whole season without a paid staff guy. I stepped in. It was great. I'm not a youth pastor, but I did then. I went into the children's department every Sunday for like 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and I would do what's called a sermon in a sack.
Hmm.
And, I'd pull something out of the bag and I'd talk about it. Sometimes it was like a trick, a little illusion or something like that. And I'd share
Right.
a story on it, or pull something out of the bag. I'm not a children's pastor, but I did it. Why? And that's what I said a while ago is the older you get, the more focused you can become. But boy, when I'm starting off at age 19, that's what I would say to someone who's just getting started. I was so hungry I would do anything.
Right.
But I had a servant's heart just to be around people. I remember going into a big auditorium, and I said, "Hey, I'll set up chairs."
And I'm sure there's things in those times that you learned that you couldn't learn otherwise. You can't learn it in the classroom. The times you picked up chairs, or the times you talked to the kid, in the youth group, or all these different scenarios and experiences. You can't teach that. You had to go through those times to get to, and it actually makes who you are currently today.
There's times you got to do the mundane before it becomes miraculous. It's John chapter 2. Go fill the water pots with water. They had to carry water before they could dispense wine.
Hmm.
It just so there's a long season. I say to young people all the time, because young people, they see the stardom of being on the stage, especially in ministry, and I think it's dangerous. The stage is a dangerous place to be if you don't have character, because what happens is your public place becomes greater than your private space, and character is established behind closed doors where no one's looking. Intimacy, that's your secret chamber. You develop that outside of the spotlight. And if young people aren't willing to do behind the scene things and to serve, like I had interns with our ministry, and I would always watch and observe how the young people would just serve. Would they come in, sit in the back on their phones? Would they walk into a church and man, can I straighten up chairs? Can I run a sweeper? Can I get the coffee ready for the lobby? What? And if they served spontaneously without me saying, man, get off your phone, that often was a good indicator that they had that mentality of doing the mundane before they expect the miraculous.
That's really good. I like the carrying water, and now too writing it down. I hear you say it starts with hunger, a hunger and a passion. The kids that didn't just sit down and look at their phone, the ones that would get up and do things, they had, or they're showing an internal drive to do excellence and be excellent in whatever their assignment is currently. And so I hear you say that to be successful in your work, in the good works that God's laid out for you, it starts with hunger. It starts with pursuing Him in excellence, and doing every little thing in excellence that's in front of you, all the little tiny things.
Yep, 100%. And that breaks down in every aspect of your life. It starts with getting up in the morning and making your bed. But every aspect of life, there's a necessity to do even the mundane with a sense of excellence, and to do a job well done. And hunger produces a life that everything you do is done with excellence. And it creates a foundation for when you do the thing that you're assigned to do. There's enough consistency in your life that the thing that you're called to do falls into place.
So if you feel called to a certain area, then and you even I think passion helps drive our actions. But what I hear you saying also is is double down on getting better at what you're called to do and to become. So if you're called to speak, get better at speaking. Like read books, practice, do things that will study the word, do things that will actually make you better at what you're actually being called to do as well.
Sure. And again, the manifestation of that looks different. I'm 62. When I was 22, it was different. It was 22. I was teaching children. I was teaching youth. I was, uh, pretty much opportunities would come, and I would just, man, I'd do it. I have the ability. I have the maturity, maybe at 62, to be a bit more selective.
You have to be more discerning.
I have to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now, so, but yeah, there's a, but hunger is just essential. And I'm going to feed that hunger appropriately. And I have a choice. Am I going to sit here and go through TikTok, or am I going to refine my mind reading a book and getting into the scriptures?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this even applies to the marketplace as well. There's the people that are called to become CEOs or presidents of companies. I feel like there's a whole group of people that they know deep down at age 12, they felt like, I'm called to lead a company. I'm called to do marketing. I'm called to do this, that, and the other. But they're in their current job or their current role isn't a CEO, and it's a matter of staying faithful to their work and do, just like in your context of all the opportunities that you had within the church to sweep the floor, to teach the youth, to load chairs up, applies for that person that's called to be CEO. Do your work with excellence, whether it's a spreadsheet or a Word document or a PowerPoint, whatever you're asked to do. People take note of that. People will see that and will begin to raise you up, and favor will actually rest on your life because of doing things with excellence.
Sure. I agree with that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I appreciate your time today. Is there one piece of advice you would give the audience listening right now, in context of those wrestling with, their purpose and understanding their calling?
Well, understand my perspective is from a biblical point of view, from a Christian point of view. So I have those lenses on. So it may not necessarily apply to every calling or genre out there. But from a biblical standpoint, we only get to know what our calling is when we spend time with the caller.
Yep.
And so we're going to have to spend. So if there's someone listening to this and they're a Christian and they're ambiguous as to, man, I don't know what I'm on the planet for. The only way they're really going to discern that is spend time in the secret place with the Lord. Create a private history. Spend time with him. That there's because God has a calling and God has an identity stamped on every human. You read it in Ephesians 2:10. We are his poetry. We are his fabric, as some scholars say. We've been woven. For what? For good works. We're all designed by God for good works. The word works is ergon, the Greek word. It means output, production, product, fruit, outspill. all of us as believers have been designed by God for a productive, specific purpose,
Hmm.
active purpose. And you're not going to know what that is unless you spend time with him. So that's what that would be my advice. Spend time with him. Spend lots of time with
Yeah, I agree with that. When you say, just to bring more context, the secret place, that's closing your bedroom door and seeking him and praying, reading his word. He will speak to you for sure. There's no doubt every time you sit with him, he wants to give us a daily word. Spending time with him is the only way. I agree. Thank you, Pastor Rob. And people can find your books at fireschoolministries.com. What are some books you have out there?
Boy, I got a 21-day study on your mouth. How
Okay.
you use your mouth. I'm around a lot of people, a lot of believers that believe it's okay to grumble and complain and whine, and the scripture's pretty clear about that. So that's a no-no. So I got a 21-day study that also becomes a 21-week study. There's a built-in study guide. You can get that. It's called Life and Death, The Power of Words. You can get it on Amazon. So Life and Death, The Power of Words. You can get it at fireschoolministries.com. I have a web store, so all of my resources are there. And yeah, there's a lot of resources. There's more resources on my website, fireschoolministries.com, than there are at Amazon, but there's several different resources on Amazon if they want to go there.
Awesome.
But um, yeah, I got a book coming out here probably in a few weeks called book number 2 in a 4-part series called A Culture of Prayer.
Wow.
So
That'll be good.
this is number 2. It'll be on the website and it'll also be on Amazon.
All right. Be first to get it. Oh, again, I appreciate your time and thank you for stopping in on the podcast.